All right, so my name's Kerston with the Savior Institute. I've been ranching for about the last 15 years, and for the last 2 years, I've got the pleasure to get to work with the Savior Institute, founded by Alan Savory, who we'll talk about a little bit. But I want to tell you guys about some friends of mine. They're largely misunderstood in the world today, but I think most of us here are kind of champions for our livestock friends. But I really think that these guys are heroes, and they're our option to save the planet. So what I'm going to talk about is more than organic. We're talking more than grass-fed. We're talking more than about sustainability. We're talking about regenerative solar farming. So I've got to be careful because in a room like this, I know we'll have some smart folks, but who remembers the equation, we all learned it in high school biology, of photosynthesis? You got it? 100%? No. Anybody have it 100%? Yeah? Because you'd be the first. I've done this all over the world. Do you got it? Okay. Give it out.
Carbon dioxide and water.
So it's C6 plus
H2O.
H2O, yep. So the simplified version we're going to go over really quick here for everyone. You've got water in the soil. So there's water that's available here, and we'll get back to this, but that's actually the limiting factor of the equation. You've got carbon dioxide up in the air, floating around up there, and then the plant, through the power of sunlight, is able to break those two compounds apart and take hydrogen from the H2O and take carbon from the carbon dioxide and make carbohydrates, mostly glucose, and that gets stored in the soil. So this is a pretty important, and then leftovers oxygen. So this is a pretty important process. We want as much of this going on as possible on the planet, right? We want to pull carbon dioxide out of the air and put it into the ground where it's a benefit and not a liability. So if we want as much of this as possible, let's start thinking about grazing and how this could impact this equation. So I'm going to ask you guys, what's worse, 1 cow for 100 days or 100 cows for 1 day on equal size paddocks that for all intents and purposes are exactly the same, just for this hypothetical scenario? So I'm going to ask for a show of hands. Who thinks 1 cow for 100 days is going to promote more photosynthesis long term? On the left there, 1 cow for 100 days. Okay, who thinks 100 cows for 1 day is better off for the system? Okay, half of you didn't vote, but most of the people voted for the right there, for the 100 cows for 1 day. So let's go and look at it again from the plant's perspective. So the plant, let's say it's completely ungrazed at all, nothing happens in there, there's no disturbance in its life. It reaches the end of its life cycle and it dies out. And now that sun that was such a benefit now actually chemically oxidizes the plant and basically turns it into a skeleton, to where CO2 in that oxidation process goes back into the atmosphere, and now you've got this skeleton of minerals that sits there and it shades out any chance for future growth. But if we could take our magic wand and go back before that, and the plant's still alive, and let's say a grazer comes through, wild or domestic, and takes a bite. Now what do we do? Our solar collectors are damaged. You're the plant. What are you going to do? That's right. So you take sugars that you've stored in your roots, those sugars that we made, that glucose, are going to get translated into work and turned back into grow the leaf. Okay. But in that process of pulling those sugars up, you have to let some of that root mass deeper down in the soil die off. Now this is really important because that die-off is now organic matter that no longer is attached to the plant, that now is available for microbes to feed on. So we've done a really cool thing here. We've injected organic matter into the soil. Where in most other ecosystems, the organic matter always stays as litter on the surface and then has to be taken down by microbes into the soil. So what we want to have happen is we want enough time to go by that those roots can actually grow back, and with the added fertility of that organic matter that we've injected, that we actually build positive growth into the system. So now let's go back to our equation. We've got the 1 cow for 100 days, 100 cows for 1 day. If you were going to rent from BLM or any government agency, these would be 100% equal in their minds. But we've just looked at, they're very different in the way that those animals behave. So the 1 cow for 100 days has the option of selectivity. So she's going to go out, and while we might just see a pasture of grass, there's quite a bit of biodiversity there, and the more the better, frankly. So she's going to go out and she's going to pick her first favorite species, then her next favorite species, and then her next favorite species after that. Well, in that time frame, those first grass plants have had time to grow back, and now she bites them again. And we've broken now what we call the law of the second bite. And that law of the second bite means that we inverse the relationship. So we had the grass plant, it got bitten, the roots sloughed off to regrow the grass. Now we've got tall grass but short roots. If she bites again before the roots have had time to regrow, even though it looks recovered from the human perspective above the soil, we've dipped into our reserves too far. And so that's an unsustainable scenario, and it doesn't take more than a few times that to happen, and that plant dies out. In the 100 cows for one day scenario, we've got competition. And so those animals go in and they eat everything, because you don't have the option of selectivity when 99 of your friends are going and trying to eat the same food. And there's a couple benefits of this. One, we get even impact. But number two, the herd health actually goes up because they're eating plants that maybe aren't as sweet, but have some bionutrients in them and minerals that could be medicinal and help improve their health. What I purposely didn't say is how long in the second equation, or in either equation, it takes before we come back. So we didn't talk at all about leaving time for regeneration. Oh, I want to say real quickly, one really important point over here to note is that not only are we overgrazing those plants that the cow likes, we're simultaneously undergrazing the plants that she doesn't. So you're overgrazing and undergrazing at the same time. And this is what undergrazed plants look like. This is that chemically oxidized plant that has sat in the sun and volatilized its CO2. You can see the same thing in like a thatch roof. This is popular throughout Africa and really much of the world as a building material, but you can see the sun is the process here. So it doesn't penetrate more than about an inch in, even though all that is all the same age. So if we've grown a bunch of grass and we want it to biologically decay, what are we going to do to make that happen? Well, there's two different environments in the world that we deal with. We deal with places that are humid year-round, like a jungle would be a perfect example of this. And so we call this a non-brittle environment. But then much of the world, about 2/3 of the world, has seasonal humidity, to where it will have a rainfall season or a humidity season and then long periods of dryness. What happens in those long periods of dryness is the microbes in the soil go dormant. And so they either die off or go dormant, and they're not doing any biological breakdown. So we have all this material here that needs to break down before the next wet season comes, so that there's room for that flush, for that growth. So what does nature use in this system? This is where she brings in the power of the rumen. So the rumen is basically a giant fermentation chamber. The cow, as a mammal like us, is no more able to break down cellulose than we are. But she has this beautiful symbiotic relationship with microbes in her rumen there that she has access to moisture. She has access to be able to go to get to a river, a lake, a spring, and feed them water and food. If the same microbes were in the soil, it's too dry. They would die off or they'd have to go dormant. And so the microbes exist in her stomach. She takes a bite of grass, it goes into her rumen, and it's like this microbial womb in there. You know, it's wet, it's warm, it's dark, it's a perfect environment for microbes to thrive. So the population explodes. And this is when the really cool part happens. When the grass then is now broken down and ready to pass to the next chamber of her stomach, it takes a whole bunch of those microbes with it. And much of the protein that she gets in her diet are from microbes that she farmed herself from feeding them in her rumen. Okay, so very little is actually taken out of the ecosystem here in terms of grass. Most of that biomass gets returned back out behind her, and like most probiotics, the same in humans, they're going to pass, much of them are going to pass through the GI tract, come out behind her in this beautiful pat of manure that now is probiotic rich and ready to enhance the soil with those same positive microbes to break down organic material. So if we remove livestock from areas, which is the general trend in ecology today, and what we see through most of conventional science, is you're going to see this is the Jornada Research Station in New Mexico. And in the late 40s and early 50s, they were having a problem where they were seeing what we call succession species, where brush was starting to come in. And they didn't want that. And so they slowly started limiting the number of livestock that were allowed to graze there. And then in the 50s, in the later 50s, they said, you know what? No more grazing. This below is a photo from 2012, which means that from the late 50s to 2012, there's been no, and really to today, there's been no grazing there. Which of the two species have survived there, the grass or the shrubs? The shrubs have clearly taken over. So if we want to mimic how grasslands are managed by nature, this is what it looks like. It's large scale and it's intensive, and it's constantly bunched and moving. It's always on the move. But why is it on the move? If you're that individual cow or you're that individual wild grazer and you could go and pick your favorite plants, why wouldn't you do that? Why would you stay with the herd? And one of the things I like about working with grazers of all kinds is we share some software with them. We are herding tool makers and they are herding grazers. And so we share that herding software. And to demonstrate this, I'll kind of point out there's a good example of it in here. But if you've got a theater that's empty, and as you walk in the theater, there's one other person sitting in the middle, how likely are you to sit right next to that person? Not real likely. But now, let's say the next scenario, I open the door for you, and I shove you in, and as I'm shoving you in, I'm closing the door behind you, and I'm locking it. And right as I close it, I say, in addition to that one other person, there's a mountain lion hiding somewhere in the shadows. How likely are you to sit with that person now? You're probably in their lap. So it's the same with livestock. When predator pressure is present, they bunch together. And this is what nature really thrives on, when you have uniform impact that comes in and then moves on. So if we want our livestock systems to mimic that, we need to start thinking a lot more like this, and instead of set stocking on open range. But basically, holistic management, we're looking at whole systems, and we're looking at the social, environmental, and economic complexity at one time, and then being proactive and building a plan on that complexity. So in holistic management, we want to see profit and cash flow increase. We want to see production increase, both ecological and business production. And we want to see social well-being increase. And this could apply to any business or industry, but its roots were founded in ecology. So I'm going to talk a little bit about rotational grazing, which people often think is a synonym for holistic management, but really holistic management is so much more. If you start your animals in that paddock and you just move them clockwise, kind of willy-nilly without any plan of where you're going or why, there's a good chance you're not going to meet your goals. So really, holistic planned grazing is a much bigger system than that. So let's say we start with animals in the top right here, and we move them down to the bottom right, because we know on our plan every year we need to build time in for a family vacation. So this is a bigger paddock, we've got more space in there, a little bit more room, and we might not hit our goals in terms of ecologically of getting the density that we want, but we know ahead of time that we have to build in time for the family. So we also know from our plan that we can't go into this paddock next, because that's where we have ground nesting birds. So we're not going to do that. So what about this paddock over here? Well, this is our easiest paddock, but it also happens to be the lowest time for cash flow. And so we're going to give our employees some time off during that month, let's say, and then we as the owners are going to do the work ourselves or something along those lines. And so we've got that built into the plan ahead of time. And then the birds have moved on, they've reared their young, and they're gone, and they're migrated. But now it's the hottest time of summer, and there along the creek where the birds were nesting happens to be the place that we have the most shade. So we know we're going to go there next. So we go there. And then we need to finish our animals because we've got a meat production business that we're doing, and so we want to maximize our economic yield on this as well. And we know that this pasture is the best for finishing animals. We get the best flavor. We get the carcasses the biggest. So we want to make sure that we end up there. And then most importantly, we don't want to go back to where we came from until we've had full recovery. And so let's say for this property, it's 60 days during the growing season or something like that. So that you can build your whole plan based on that recovery first of how long you need, which then tells you how long you have to graze in each other area. And then you base those areas with all the social, financial, and economic things that you know about the ranch. So that's just one component of holistic management. It's called holistic planned grazing, but these are the types of things that we're going to look for. Forage production, livestock needs, other wildlife species. Maybe you're also doing crop production where you're rotating pastures out and you're putting them into traditional row crops. You want to know that ahead of time so you can build your fertility before you go in, know harvest time so you know when you can come back in. You want to look at your cash flow for the year, your plan for your profit, vacations, holidays, and family time. So when you're herding, there are 3 different methods, in essence, that you can use to herd livestock. You can use human herders, you can use electric fences that often run on solar chargers, or you can use more traditional methods like horses or dogs. But when we're doing the planned grazing, you can see here on the chart, everything is put out ahead of time, and the joke is we try to make it so easy that a child can do it. So to recap, the 4 key insights of holistic management is we need to look at whole systems. We want to understand where we are on the brittleness scale. We want to understand the predator-prey relationship and how to mimic that if it's broken. And big one, plant recovery time. Make sure that we're not just recovering for leaf matter, but that we're actually getting that carbon bankroll back into the soil and regrowing the roots. So we also in holistic management look at 4 ecosystem processes. We've got water cycle, mineral cycle, community dynamics, and energy flow. And I just want to make a quick point that all of these are interconnected. So as you change one, it will impact the other 3. We're going to skip this video here for the sake of time, but I want to show some results of the type of work we've done. This is a property in Wyoming that's been holistically managed for about 20 years. The property on the left there has twice as many animals per acre as the property on the right. And so what happened, these are taken on the same day, and the woman went and snapped a picture of her ranch here, and then went across the bridge overpass that she was on, went to this side, and snapped a photo here. So these are 2 different ranches in Wyoming on the exact same day, separated only by about 3 seconds and 30 feet. This is a property that we work with. The guy runs in Marin County, so this is wine country, actually Sonoma County. This is wine country up in Northern California, very close to where I live. This is in March. The left side conventionally grazed. The right side has twice as many animals, has been holistically managed at this point for only about 9 months. This is at 3 months later. This is the worst drought in California history for 150 years of weather records. And he's got twice as many animals over here and still that much forage. This is a property that Alan Savory works with in Zimbabwe, and this is in 2006 on the left there, and on the right is 2009, and they've gone up 400% in stocking rate. They're now looking to go up to 1,000%. So these are all pictures of that property there. This is the Karoo Desert in South Africa. They're running close to double stocking rate on the left, and on the right, it's half as many animals. This is a property we work with in Arizona. This is 2 years later, twice as many animals. What's that? Same time of year, yeah. Yeah, this one is in Coahuila, Mexico. This one Alan Savory using the TED Talk. If you haven't seen his TED Talk, it's great. Make sure and get that done. Did it go to the next one? No? What happened? Oh, the advance doesn't want to work on that one. Oh, anyway, it turns bright green. That's weird. Huh. I don't know what happened there. Anyway, so the whole water lake there disappears and it all just turns into this lush ecosystem. This is a property in Sonora, left side holistically managed, right side not. This is a property that we work with in Sonora as well, 2009 to 2012, though these are at different times of the year. And in the atmosphere, it's a problem. In the soil, it's a benefit. Organic matters are your smallest particles in the soil. You've got sand, silt, clay, and organic matter. Organic matter is the smallest, which means it has the most surface area, and it actually really, really, really wants to hold on to water. So it's the strongest sponge that we have in the soil, and it's all carbon-based. And so we've got to figure out a way to get it back in. And so we've got this great methodology of holistic management, but now we need to implement it on a global scale. Our goal is to impact 1 billion hectares by 2025. And so how do we do that? What if there was a place where farmers, ranchers, and pastoralists could all come together to learn a better way to manage their land, a way built upon ancient wisdom, informed by nature's patterns, a way that restores the integrity of ecological capital upon which all our existence depends? What if this place embraced and celebrated individual initiative and entrepreneurial spirit, with results so dramatic that momentum began to spread among neighbors? What if this place was one of many in a global network working together to grow beyond self-sufficiency under an intentionally different business model? What if has already begun? So we've got 30 training centers around the world right now. Every year we grow by 10 more. We get about 70 to 100 applicants that come in and want to work with us and become our proxies in a given region. Over the last 30 years, we've influenced over 20 million hectares, which is about 50 million acres, and 2.5 million of those came in last year when we trained, and we also trained over 1,800 people. So this intentionally different business model, we want to empower the farmer and the rancher. We want to measure those outcomes of what it is that they're doing. We want to grow the network through partnerships, and we want to be financially sustainable. Even though we're a nonprofit, we want to make sure that our programs are paying for themselves and paying in their own way. There's a tremendous amount of opportunity out there. Land degradation costs an estimated $40 billion annually worldwide, according to the UN FAO. The estimated cost of mismanagement of all natural assets of the world economy today is around 6.6 trillion, or 11% of global GDP. And the annual loss of 75 billion tons of soil, I would say, is priceless. That happens each year, but Rattan Lal put it at about $400 million. So our goal is these 100 locally led and managed hubs that could be existing organizations or ranchers or just impassioned individuals that then take this into their own context, their own social, political, environmental context, and take this out and become our proxies in that region. So what these hubs do, these 30 that we have now as we're marching towards 100, is they do holistic management training. They'll do individual consulting with ranchers and farmers in their region, and they'll provide the role of biological monitoring if the rancher doesn't want to do that themselves. They'll help them get involved in ecosystem services to break into emerging carbon and water markets as those develop around the world. They'll become market aggregators of products like wool, meat, leather, milk. And then they become rural entrepreneurial incubators. And so let's say there's a weak link where an individual area doesn't have a slaughterhouse or something like that. Many of our hubs have helped get those started. We also have what we call the holistic platform, and the holistic platform has three legs to the stool. There's a data management component, a social media platform, and online learning. So the online learning, you can go online, and I'll talk about this in a second, but you can take our courses online there. The data management component is probably the most important piece in that you can actually collect data from your land and put it right into the database, use it for your own records, but then it also gets anonymously aggregated into our whole data set so we can see what kind of progress we're making around the world. In that we have a biological monitoring component. We're working on a livestock performance module in there so you can actually keep all your performance records. We've got social well-being monitoring, which I'll talk about in a second, and then we're working on financial software interfaces so that you can work with like your existing QuickBooks and things like that. And then the social media platform is a space for people around the world to collaborate on these issues. That's Bullet Coffee there on the right. So we've got these three stools that we're working on. Last night, I played with our GIS planned grazing software, and I actually made a grazing plan for this site. So you've got the Palmer Event Center there, you've got the lake out back, and then I broke this up into 8 paddocks, and I marked where imaginary water lines would be and water points. And so you can keep records on all of those pieces of both when animals were in and out, as well as all performance data on those specific things when water points were upgraded or maintenance data and things like that, fence line stuff, all of that can all be kept in one central place and inform your ongoing grazing plan year after year. One of my colleagues at the Sabre Institute has a degree in positive psychology, and she said, it's great that we have this social well-being component within our mission and within the goals of holistic management, but we don't do anything to monitor it ongoing. And so she created this new program, it's just about to launch, where you actually go through and every 4 to 6 weeks you would go and you would do a survey, kind of a where you are, just a recap, and it spits you out this really cool graphic that shows, okay, these are your strong points and these are your weak points, and then it pulls up a report that then says, these are things to work on. If you're low in resiliency right now, these are things that you can do in your life to help enhance that. That information can be just for the individual themselves, or it can be shared with a team, or if you would like, it could be averaged among a team so that employers can look at that and say, okay, well, here's how the team health is doing. So you can set that privacy up the way that you want. The hubs that we have now that are accredited are Argentina, Chile, Ethiopia. We have 2 in Kenya, 4 in Mexico, 6 in the US. The 6 in the US are Washington, California, Arizona, Colorado, Maryland, and New York. Spain, South Africa, Sweden, Turkey, and Zimbabwe. And then we've got quite a few in process right now: Australia, Canada, Costa Rica, Georgia, Idaho, Malawi, Michigan. Fella is in the program right now here from Austin, and the United Kingdom. So this is our hub training last year. What we do is we take all of our 10 new hub candidates. The reason we only take 10 per year is because we put so much energy into them. And so we take them through a whole year-long training program of how to be facilitators and trainers of trainers, and what it means to be a good consultant, and what it means to implement all these plans. And then we also go through a full business training with them. So here they are at our leadership boot camp, which involves that business training in Zimbabwe. So we all gather together a few times a year somewhere around the globe. And this is at Alan Savory's home ranch there, Dimangombe Ranch. This was the year before. We did a smaller group came to Spain, and we did the same training there. This is our hub in Patagonia. They work largely with sheep. They've got about 6 million acres under management right now and about 100 farmers in their program. This is a multi-generational ranch in Mexico. So the fellow there, Ivan, his 2 sons have grown up in holistic management. So Ivan started in '83, I think, and now he's one of our hubs, and he's got a great program running. This is in Spain, where they actually graze in the olive orchards with their sheep there. This one is in Argentina. This is our hub leader, Lizzie, in Chile. She just had a baby, but they have a phenomenal wool program I'll talk a little bit more about. Argentina again, Chile. This is Kenya, working with the Maasai. This is our hub in Lower Kenya, run by Tarquin, who was born and raised in Kenya, and they've got this great eco-lodge there and this beautiful ranch. This is from the hub in Zimbabwe, where we work with all of our materials are also translated into materials that if you were illiterate of both letters and numbers, you would still be able to be a part of this. And so we work with a lot of communal tribes around the world. And this is a Sazinda community, and this is how you could make like a planned grazing chart pictorially. So this is their example of that. This is one of the boys that I met while I was there. He's great. This is safaris that are done at our ranch in Dimangombe all the time. This is a really cool spot. This is our hub in Sweden in the town of Åre, and it's a place where people from all over Europe come and ski there. And so the rest of the year, there's virtually no industry. It's a little further north, and it's a pretty harsh environment. And the rancher there, his name is Jorgen, went to a bunch of the owners of the ski lodges and said, hey, I'd really like to graze these ski slopes in the spring, summer, and fall when you guys aren't using them. Would that be okay? And they said, yeah, that'd be fine. We'd love to have them utilized. And he said, well, I don't really have any sheep either at the moment. Would you like to buy some sheep and I'll graze them for you on the property? And they said, sure. So he created this cooperative where they have all these 4-star resorts that are vacant for like 7 to 8 months of the year. And so they bought into the program, and they bought the sheep, and now he custom grazes those animals for them on their own land, goes through all the process of getting them finished and then butchering them, and then they serve them on their menus right there in the ski slopes. And so when you go skiing there in Åre, the lamb that you eat was grown 100 feet away on the ski slopes that you skied on all day. So all of these processes can be done without capital, and so that's something that's important in our education and programming that we talk about, how you would find examples like that to where you could do something similar. This woman here is from Denmark. She's an intern at our hub in Turkey, has grown up in agriculture and kind of wanted to see a different way to do things. This is one of the communities that we work with in Zimbabwe as well. What we do there that's really interesting is each family member, the head of the household, usually the father, will go and they'll graze their animals each day. So they walk with them and they go everywhere and graze them. And so they might only have, it's very common to have between 4 and 12 animals. And so they're walking with them everywhere they go. The first thing we say is, if you want to build in as much time for rest as possible, that you combine that herd together, they become one uniform impact, and then you let that land recover, like we showed already. Well, you don't need every man in the village to herd a uniform herd of animals. So they still maintain ownership, but they start working together collaboratively in their grazing process. And so then, like a timeshare in reverse, you only work so many days per month. When your lottery ticket comes up that says, you have to go out with the grazers, with the herd and go graze them, then you go out with them. Well, this freed up about 80% of the male labor in that village. And so now the men and women work together in the garden, and the kids are able to go to school. So just another example of when you're looking at the whole picture and trying to make social changes as well in your goals, that you can work backwards and say, okay, what does the business need to look like to get there? This is the same fellow that did the sheep business there in Sweden. He also has, if you've seen online on like Facebook and stuff, the raw milk vending machines that are all popular throughout Europe. He helped start those. So he's got a raw milk dairy there as well that he works with. These are 2 hub leaders in Turkey. These guys both have, MBAs, grew up in Istanbul, and, had a family ranch and wanted to go back, and they've started this whole rural resurgence. And in their process of learning about this property and what it takes to run it, they came across holistic management, and they interned with us for about 5 years on another property, and now are leading this movement in Turkey, which is really exciting. This is Will Harris, who's part of our candidacy program this year in Georgia. He's got the only owned and operated USDA slaughter plant that's on your own ranch. It's very hard to get that done bureaucratically. And he's got a beautiful, thriving operation. They've got 2,000 acres. They started with about 12 employees. I think he's somewhere about 250 right now. And they just continue to increase the production there. So then I'm getting the hook here, the shepherd's hook, so I'm just going to skip through to the end here. This is a project that we're working on with Sagarpa in Mexico. It's their version of the USDA. Prince Charles has been a big supporter of our work, so he's helped facilitate that. So we've got some key partnerships here. I want to say a couple of thanks to Epic Bar, who's here. Epic helped raise $25,000 for us last December. They've continued to be partners and supporters of ours, and we're trying to partner with them and helping them source the best quality product that they can get that's all holistically managed for their bars. So make sure and go talk to Epic. They're fantastic. I'm going to skip our partner organization, Grasslands LLC, that works with large-scale real estate investors and does turnkey operations with them. We've got some special projects going on with the Nature Conservancy. But then the part I really want to get to, I don't want to skip this, is we all sit in this milieu of how much meat should you eat? And that is the discussion that's being had all the time in the world today. And from our point of view, and I know that from the paleo perspective it's going to be a little bit different, but we want to focus on the quality first. Let's make that the prime component of the conversation, that if you're going to eat meat, let's make sure it's the best that it possibly can be. And then the quantity debate needs to come after that. It still needs to be had, but it can be had after that. So I like this meme I saw on the internet. What if I told you could avoid Meatless Mondays? By the way, Meatless Mondays is really only a US phenomenon. The rest of the world is no way has bought onto this. But I say let's embrace Meatful Monday, because skipping meat on Mondays is not a solution to this. And so I think thank you. I think we have to ask ourselves, do we want this or do we want this? And so what we're doing to try to support this is products that are tied to land-based standards. And so those land-based standards, you would go into an area and say, what is the baseline of what this land is doing ecologically that's either unmanaged or poorly managed? And then let's set that baseline. And then say, what is it doing when it's being properly managed in a system like holistic management? What is the potential? And so we've done this in Argentina, where Patagonia Inc., the clothing company, is now buying all of their wool from our hub down there. So everything that you buy from Patagonia Inc. from wool, it's their merino stuff, is all from that hub that's working with like 6 million acres down there. And so what Patagonia said to us is, hey, sustainable is not enough. We can't put that in the labeling. The planet's already screwed. We've got to show that we're making net positives, and we need the data to support it. So what we did is we started collecting all of that data, and this has been the impetus for much of this. We started collecting that data and aggregating it all together. And so that data from an individual piece of land gets tied to the product all the way through the distribution stream, and you can show what kind of results you had on that land, everything from water holding capacity, soil carbon, wildlife species, percentage of bare ground, and the increases that come from there within. So they can then go in their marketing and say, this is a regenerative product. Well, once they got involved, Stella McCartney, who is Paul McCartney's daughter, who, if you know, they're very vocal about being vegetarian and vegan, she said, I'd really like to have wool in my line, but I need to make sure that it's shown to be regenerative and humane. And so she went through the program and looked at it and said, this could work for us. So we've just started working with Stella McCartney, too. So I'm going to show a couple of resources here as we close. I think recommended reading would be Defending Beef by Nicolette Nyman. Fantastic woman. She's an environmentalist lawyer, worked with Bobby Kennedy, sued a bunch of CAFOs, and then married Bill Nyman, who, if you're familiar, started Nyman Meats, who sells all the meat to Chipotle. And she looked at this and said, wow, there's another side to this coin. There's another way that we could be living. She's been vegetarian for, I think, over 30 years and continues to live that lifestyle. though she says it's strictly out of habit. From her own perspective, she's just not ready to go there, but she's raised her kids and her family all on a rich grass-fed meat diet. So it's a fantastic book. She's going to disagree from us in this movement on how much quantity to eat, but if you want the best peer-reviewed articles on why this planet needs more grazing, this is a really good compilation of that. One thing to point out before I go is it's widely accepted in science. There's no debate that this planet used to hold tremendously more wild ruminants, grazing animals, than we have today that are wild or domestic. So if we know that and we can agree on that, what's different now in this debate about climate? And one of the things that's different is management that's being changed. Another thing that's different is they take the numbers that they use off of conventional dairies that use their manure that goes into a manure lagoon. That lagoon is anaerobic, and then that off gas is a whole lot more methane. And they take that data and they go, look, these grain-fed animals in anaerobic, with manure and anaerobic conditions, is gotta be the same as grass-fed animals out on the range. It's not. So something to point out. Another great book is Cows Save the Planet by Judy Schwartz. Fantastic book, Gardeners of Eden. It's kind of an oldie but goodie. That's a good one too. And then real quick, I'm going to close on what things you can do to get involved. We've got a brand new website, savory.global. So the whole trend in the world now is to cut .coms and .orgs off. So now we're savory.global. If for some reason you can't find it, you can still get to us, savoryinstitute.org. That site's about 10 days old. There's a lot of great information on there. And then our courses, the Foundations of Holistic Management. This is our first 5 courses we have. I've put up a code on that, so if you're interested in taking those courses, you can put in the code Paleo15 up until April 30th and get a discount on that. Also want to check out our book, Holistic Management, a new framework for decision making that Alan wrote. It's fantastic. And then we have a conference coming up, a conference specifically for health practitioners, foodies, educated consumers, impact investors. This is our one big annual event that we do internationally every year. Last year's was in London. Next year's we're looking at Istanbul, Sydney. So it's kind of cool that it's local to this continent. So that's going to be October 2nd through 5th in San Francisco. So hopefully I've given you some tools to help champion for our friends livestock and help kind of bring the level of consciousness up on these animals and how important they are to the sake of humanity. So with that, thank you very much.